everyone, welcome back. It is day 24 of the 28-day Get Hired Challenge. I'm Alyssa Miller, and today and tomorrow we are digging into this lovely thing we call imposter syndrome. Everybody, welcome back to yet another day of the 28-day Get Hired Challenge. It's day 24. We're almost done, but we're still talking about how do we set you up for long-term career success, because it does no good to get hired into cybersecurity only to then, fizzle out and not make a career out of it. The goal of most people trying to launch a career anywhere is to be successful in that career. And this thing we call imposter syndrome, it is probably one of the most insidious things that anyone can experience, and it is known to destroy careers. So let's dig into it. What is imposter syndrome? Well, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, a definition from the Oxford Dictionary. Yes, you'll find imposter syndrome in the Oxford Dictionary nowadays. So imposter syndrome is ultimately the persistent inability to recognize that one's successes and accomplishments are a result of their own skills and abilities. That's it. That's imposter syndrome. It's looking at everything that you have done and feeling like you don't belong. Like you got there by accident. You don't really deserve the success you've gotten. And it happens to literally everybody. Now, I think it's one of those things where everybody's experienced it to one degree or another. And if you legitimately haven't, A, you're fortunate, maybe. Or B, there might be a little narcissism going on there too, and maybe you're in a little bit of denial. I'm not going to speculate on which. But what we are going to do is we're going to talk about the causes of imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is something that, depending on the studies you look at, anywhere from 60 to 80% of the population experiences imposter syndrome. It's reported more commonly by women and minorities as opposed to white men. Now, I'm not going to speculate on the reasons for that. I'm just giving you the straight out of the studies facts, okay? That's just numbers. So you take that to mean what you will, but I've got some ideas. That's a conversation for another time. But let's talk about the causes of imposter syndrome. How do we end up here in the first place? I'm going to cover 5 specific causes that I talk about in the Cybersecurity Career Guide, because these are the things I think really lead to this overwhelming inability to just say, yeah, you know what? This thing that I achieved, I deserved it because I worked hard and I'm smart and I got there. Or, this new job that I landed, this new promotion, this big new opportunity, yeah, I deserve it. I got there because of my hard work. I got there because of my skill set. So the first one, let's start with, is perfectionism. Okay, now that's a fun little word, but it's those unrealistic expectations that we tend to put on ourselves. We expect ourselves to be absolutely flawless in every degree, especially when we're chasing something that we want as bad as maybe a career in cybersecurity. when we've worked hard and we're pushing really hard to get to something, we expect ourselves to be absolutely flawless in that pursuit. And when we make mistakes, we start to look at that and say that somehow is, a reflection on us not being skilled enough, not being good enough. The reality is mistakes are how we learn. If you didn't make mistakes, if everything just happened for you, then you wouldn't be learning. So you have to expect mistakes. We call them failures sometimes. I don't like to call them failures because, again, they're learning opportunities, which sounds kind of corny, but that's the reality. That is a time where you tried to do something, you didn't get there. Maybe it's not even a mistake. Maybe it's just you didn't achieve a specific goal. You learned from that process. You probably learned things that taught you why you didn't get there, things you could have done differently, but you also learned just by going through that process. So when it comes to perfectionism, it's important to recognize that everybody is going to make errors. Everybody is going to fail to achieve a goal, and that doesn't make you less. That means you're learning, which makes you even stronger. Now, what also doesn't help with this is the second cause, which is industry expectations. So looking at cybersecurity specifically, our industry has a lot of expectations thrust upon us. We're in a very difficult situation. In most organizations, our cybersecurity team is expected to keep us from getting breached. Period. We're supposed to be perfect in that. And yet we know we can't be. I'll tell you, the first day on the job, in my role as CISO, I met with the CEO, and that's the first thing he said to me. He said, "Don't let us get breached." Well, that's great. Of course, that's what I'm working for. But I also have to work for the, perhaps inevitability that it might happen. And how are we going to be resilient to it to keep our business going and so that it's not damaging to us or our clients? So, we get a lot of those expectations in this industry, and that also leads to then, that certain sense of we're just not good enough. Anything that we achieved was just therefore lucky because, well, we're just simply not good enough. That's baloney, but it comes from those expectations that we put on ourselves and that the industry puts on us. Another thing, and this is really rampant in cybersecurity, I have found, at least in my experience, is the comparison to others. Now, here's a graphic that appears in the book that kind of explains this a little bit. If I think about, how people typically perceive their knowledge, and I'm talking about the whole domain of cybersecurity here, this big oval, right? That's the big overall encompassing level of all knowledge in cybersecurity. And I look at that cloud and I say, well, I think, I see myself as just this little cloud with this little bit of knowledge, and everybody else in cybersecurity has this big cloud of knowledge and they know so much more than me. Well, there are lessons in neuroscience about this, that this is our perception. It's the way we perceive other people, because what happens is we perceive multiple other individuals who all have their own specialized knowledge. But what we do, this is the natural human tendency, is to draw all of their individualistic knowledge into one big pool and make it look like that giant cloud. When in reality, this is what's going on. We each have our own area of knowledge. And you notice how every one of these little areas of knowledge, these little pools of knowledge, these little clouds of knowledge that we have, notice how they overlap. And it's because all those red ones, they overlap. That's why we start to see that we think that someone who knows a whole bunch about social engineering clearly knows everything there is to know about digital forensics. Wait, no, that's not true. That's not the way it works. And that's the reality of it. But so when we start comparing ourselves to other people, this is what happens. We start to see ourselves as having just this tiny little niche. We'll never know enough. We'll never know as much as others. We'll never be strong enough. We'll never have enough knowledge because everybody else is just so much smarter than we are. So comparison to others is super damaging and a huge cause of imposter syndrome. Another one, and now here I am going to espouse on my theory a little bit. We talk about why women and minorities report more imposter syndrome than anyone else. Well, because one of the causes of imposter syndrome is lack of representation. If I'm a woman in cybersecurity, that means 20% of cybersecurity looks like me. We talked about this way back when we talked about diversity, right? The numbers are not representative of the general population. So when I get into cybersecurity as a woman and I start to experience success, I feel like I don't belong because I don't have the visibility of other women who are doing the same. When I'm a woman and I become a CISO in particular, very difficult. If I'm a black woman, oh my God, it gets even worse as far as representation. Who do I see around me? There's so few because they're so underrepresented that I don't see anyone that looks and thinks like I do. And so I start to feel like I don't belong. And that's why I think this is why we see those numbers in the studies, because it's a reality. The lack of representation, if we don't see others like us, and that goes for all forms of demographics and everything else, right? There's 100 different reasons. So I'm not just saying it's about race or gender or any demographical category. It could be that, you know what? Hey, I'm a hacker and I'm in this corporate space where everyone I see are all these people with, MBAs and PhDs and they've all got this huge business experience. I grew up in technology. I was a technologist. I was a hacker. I liked that. I was a programmer. All of those things. And so when I get into corporate executive spaces, I don't necessarily see myself being represented in my peers. And that, just as much as anything else, can lead to imposter syndrome. And then all of this gets summed up in the last cause, which is the tendency that people have to diminish our accomplishments. We look at it and we say, yeah, but that accomplishment isn't so good because, I had help. Someone helped me along the way. I worked with somebody else who gave me this, or I got lucky because that opportunity sort of fell in my lap. Well, no shit. That happens to people all the time. It's what you do with that matters. Nobody got to their successful positions by themselves. Okay? Read the dedication in the Cybersecurity Career Guide. I mentioned 3 managers that I have in my past that were a huge help to me. One of them gave me a very lucky opportunity. She sought me out and gave me my first opportunity to be a pen tester. Another one gave me the mindset to be a good leader. The last one taught me everything there was to know about how to bring a team together. I worked with all of them. They helped me. They gave me, I've had mentors who've given me help. Everybody gets here with help from others. Everybody will find an opportunity that they can seize on and make special for them. So just because you got an opportunity doesn't mean that your accomplishment is any less. So this is the reality of imposter syndrome. This is that thing that's so damaging. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how you overcome it. But for now, that's all the time we have. I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me about your experience. One experience with imposter syndrome. Which one of those causes do you identify with? Tell me a little bit about your experience, and one of you is going to get a free book. All of you, for the remainder of this month, can still get 35% off any title at Manning.com. Just use that discount code, or go to that short link. It'll take you straight to Manning's website, or use that QR code. Look down in the show description. The link is there as well. So I hope you'll keep coming back. We've got just a few more days, but lots of really good information. You're almost there. You're almost through the challenge. Keep coming back. I'm trying to help you get hired in cybersecurity, and I'll see you tomorrow.